Welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host, Erin James, the channel that brings you all your latest Rangers news, guys. On what has been another eventful day since, obviously, the US takeover of our football club. Look, I think, what's happened today was kind of expected, I think, a little bit, given the fact that, that Kevin Thelwell was brought in. I think there was always the intention that Nils Koppen, that's right, Nils Koppen would leave the club this summer. I mean, let's look at it this way. I think if you look at it per se, you look at Kevin Thelwell's job description, you look at Nils Koppen's job description, if you go back to when he was appointed as, obviously, technical director, they're very similar. It's basically the same job. And Thelwell was always going to obviously want to put his own stamp on this, bring his own people in. And obviously Nils Koppen has found himself pushed out now, and Koppen has left the club. Look, whatever you think of Nils Koppen as technical director of scouting, whatever his official job title was, you've got to kind of look at it this way. Koppen was put into an impossible position, really. He was put into a position where he was expected to recruit and bring in players, but did not have a massive amount of money. He did not have a great scouting network, and I don't think he was as advertised. When people talk about him being the chief scout at PSV, I don't think that was ever the case. He was a scout at PSV, certainly. And he was then to kind of pushed into, no matter what you think of the SPL as a league or, whatever, Rangers are one of the biggest clubs in Europe. We play, obviously, to win trophies every season. We play in Europe every season. We compete at the highest level in Europe every season. It is one of the biggest club jobs in the world. And, at the end of the day, he was brought in and expected to learn on the job in what, like I said, one of the biggest jobs in the world. It's hard, it's difficult. And sometimes you get lucky and someone comes in and they do an amazing job and they're fantastic at their job. Other times you come in and that person's just not up to it. And look, Nils Koppen has his good points, has his bad points. I think as everyone does it in work. And I think, to sit here today or whatever, and as a Rangers fan and sit there and say, you know what, he was shit at his job. He was dreadful. He was terrible. Oh, get rid of him. Get rid. Even Barry Bassett said that he wanted rid of him. But look, at the end of the day, he had, like I said, he had his good points, he had his bad points. I mean, yes, there was bad things about what he did, and there was good things. The good things, obviously, bringing in Hamza was a good move. Hamza's certainly someone who I think is going to bring us in an awful lot of money. I think Diamande will, in the end, go on to be sold for an awful lot of money in the end. Igaman, obviously, is the big one there. But Jefte, to some degree, is worth more than he is. I think he will adapt. The more he adapts, the better he will get at Scottish football. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to be an amazing defender. I mean, he's Brazilian, for God's sake. How many Brazilian fullbacks do you know that like to defend? I mean, if you go back to the two of the greatest fullbacks that Brazil has ever produced in Cafu and Roberto Carlos, neither of them was keen on defending. Not that I'm saying that Cafu's in the same degree as Roberto Carlos by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, he had his bad points, of course. Oscar Cortez. The Oscar Cortez deal is an absolute, millstone round Rangers' neck. The fact that we're going to have to pay $4.5 million for a cripple, is ridiculous. The fact that we probably could have been a little bit smarter in the negotiations with Lons when we brought in Cortez last summer. The fact that he was injured when we signed him on this obligation to buy deal was a bit ridiculous, really. It should have been a case of, look, we'll sign him, but it's an option to buy. And then at the end of that, we sit here this summer and we go, no, thank you. He's injured too much. And like, you can't, it is unlucky to some degree because, I mean, Koppen can't legislate for him being injured. But surely, going through and sort of reconstituting and really pushing that deal last summer when he was injured wasn't the smartest thing to do after all. So I do think the whole Oscar Cortez thing is a bit of a one where, it does fall down slightly. It really genuinely does. So I do believe that is kind of always going to be one that's going to be used against Nils Koppen. A bit of a, you've failed a little bit there, Nils, on that one. You really genuinely have. Robin Proper, Nadim Bayrami, absolute disasters. I think, Bayrami is just a passenger in every single game. Robin Proper was a bit of a disaster. Václav Černý was a good signing. Connor Barron was a good signing. Liam Kelly, I think Clinton and Ciala in time will be a good signing. Rafa Fernandez, I really didn't get that one at all. The guy hardly ever played and then was injured and then didn't play. I didn't understand that one at all. There was some very perplexing ones in that whole process. But, Proper, I think, was one where, I think that came as a kind of problem where we saw Koppen's problem, that he couldn't close deals. Obviously the Cordoba deal, which fell apart, and then we kind of panic bought Proper. And Proper is a player who has been an absolute disaster in the Scottish game. Yes, in Europe he's looked okay, but domestically he's looked really, really poor. And I think he's a player that does need to be moved on this summer. Also, I think, he's really failed to bring in substantial fees for players, and yes, you can make the argument that, trying to sell, you can't, polish a turd. But, I think only getting, €590,000, which is about £300,000 for Todd Cantwell is a bit of a joke, really. That's one that kind of is always going to be used against him. Sam Lammers, was another one that in the end didn't go for as much as advertised. Scott Wright only went for 200,000. Again, I think that could have been one where we could have had a little bit more money. The Connor Goldson deal doesn't appear to have been for a great sum of money either. So I think there are weaknesses in there. Not being able to kind of get good deals. I've been able to get rid of players. That's certainly been the case. So, look, I think Nils Koppen's time at the club is mixed. He's got his good points. He's got his bad points. And I think if anyone who sits there and tells you he's just been all-round shit isn't really looking at the whole picture. Who replaces him? That's the big question. Well, it looks like it is Dan Purdy, who is the head of recruitment was the head of recruitment at Everton. That's who is coming in as the new head of recruitment. Now, this is obviously someone that Kevin Thelwell has worked with. Kevin Thelwell going there, getting his own man. That's kind of been what he's wanted to do. He's been very much a case of, wanting to bring in his own person. Now, who is Dan Purdy? That's the big question. Who is he? What does he come from? What do we know about him? Well, like I said, he is the Everton head of recruitment, which, look, I'll judge Purdy based on what he does for Rangers. I'm not going to judge him on Everton. He did some good things at Everton, but let's face it, Everton are a tin pot, tiny little club, a bit of a joke club. He is very familiar with sporting director Kevin Thelwell, having worked for him. He left Everton and then was reappointed in 2022 by Kevin Thelwell. So it was Thelwell that brought Purdy back to Everton. He's 31 years old, so he's still very young. 31 and director of recruitment at Rangers. That's pretty amazing. That makes me kind of rethink my life a lot and think, what the hell am I doing with my life at 47? He's got a degree in science and football, performance analysis and psychology from John Moores University, and he's worked with a number of different football clubs. He did internships at Liverpool Football Club, Sheffield United and Leeds, probably where the link, not only the Everton link, but the Leeds link. He's also worked with Yorkshire County Cricket Club, one of the biggest county cricket clubs in England. He also worked at data company Instat as well, so data analysis, stat analysis is his big thing. This is very much the way the 49ers operate. If you go and look at their American way of operating, the way that they do it in America, there is a lot of data analysis, a lot of stat analysis, a lot of computer. It's the sabermetrics, it's the Billy Bean, it's the Moneyball philosophy that is used in America. And I think that's something we're going to see used even more at Rangers, especially obviously with someone like Purdy coming in. His first job at Everton was first team performance analyst as an intern, but eventually he became as a permanent member of the team. He carried out a number of different roles at Everton, including technical scout, first team scouting coordinator, manager of scouting operations, and eventually head of recruitment. Look, Purdy is someone who, like I said, he has found some gems for Everton. He found on Amadou Onana, James Garner, Iliman Ndiaye. He worked at Everton under a very tight financial budget because of the fact that, Everton, he was really, kind of trying to keep Everton FFP compliant. They were one of the teams that had previously been fined for breaches of FFP. So, he did obviously come back in and look to kind of bring Everton in line with FFP and work within those FFP constraints, to work within a budget, to work within a financially responsible budget. And we know from what Andrew Kavanagh and Parag Marathe were saying the other day that that's how they want to work. They don't want to be a ridiculous, club that goes and operates well beyond its means, which is, the best way forward. And, And I think Purdy will be charged working under Thelwell to work, within that network. I mean, I think one of the positives with this is very much now that we seem to be kind of forming a football operations team that look at recruitment, that look at scouting, that look at analysis, that look at medical, that look at everything, and putting that team together, obviously with Kevin Thelwell, with Dan Purdy, and obviously whoever the new manager will be. I mean, obviously, I think hopefully that announcement will come next week. But it's big changes. It's huge changes again, and you can see already that Parag Marathe and Andrew Kavanagh are wanting to put their own stamp on things and kind of make the club their own and take things in the right direction, and really move the club on from where it was previously. And you've got to congratulate them for that and hope that this obviously works out for them in the long run. Guys, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Koppen's gone, Purdy's in. Purdy and Thelwell now head of recruitment and scouting. Let me know what you think and the comments. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed the comments, please obviously like, comment, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching. As always, guys, we are the